This is LSU ReCon, the latest intelligence on the next Fighting Tiger opponent. Now, with the very latest from behind enemy lines, here's your host, the voice of your Fighting Tigers, Chris Blair.
That's right. Getting ready for another matchup this weekend. Second home game of 2021. Non-conference affair. Central Michigan, the Chippewas, coming down. Two teams on Saturday night that are 1-1 on the season thus far. This is where we embed, go behind the scenes, find a double agent. Let us know what to expect from the Chippewas coming up this weekend. So it's my pleasure to welcome to the show Christian Booher. He is the beat writer for Central Michigan Life. He follows the Chippewas. And Christian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. How about that applause?
This is LSU.
Well, it's great to have you. And again, this is a matchup that, is a little mysterious for Tiger fans. Certainly, for those of us who follow LSU football, have to cover the games. Now we've got to learn a little bit about the Chippewas. And again, thank you for taking time out to kind of help us a little bit. As I mentioned, they are 1-1 on the season. Kind of a mixed bag. A good showing, came up short against Missouri to open the season in Columbia, and then took on Robert Morris. As it turned out, Robert Morris unable to play the opening weekend, but so their opener actually was on the road against Central Michigan, and the Chippewas able to really impose their will in all facets, it appears, with a 45-0 victory. So when you look at where the Chippewas are now, kind of what's the sense, not only from the coaching staff, but maybe the fan base on where this team is? Are they on schedule? Are people satisfied that this could be a much improved season from the Chippewas campaign a year ago?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of optimism right now. I think going to Missouri and playing like they did, the quarterback position was kind of a question mark. You didn't know what you were going to have there out of Jacob Sirmon, the Washington transfer, and he kind of took the job and really took it by storm. I mean, that first possession against Missouri took him right down the field, touchdown pass, and since then, I mean, he made a couple of mistakes in that Missouri game, but he wasn't the reason that they lost it by any means, and I think that was the big thing was they wanted a quarterback who could move the ball down the field. I mean, you look at this roster, and there's so many skill guys that are returning. I mean, Lou Nichols has taken the next step, Ja'Cory Sullivan, Khalil Pimpleton, all those guys are back, and they were on that team 2 years ago that went to the MAC title game. The problem last year on offense was the quarterback, and Daniel Richardson wasn't bad. He just couldn't. He wasn't a game breaker, and maybe he develops that skill set over time. But I think Sermon's kind of that guy who can win games with his arm, and that's why there's so much optimism is because you finally have that guy who can make that 40-yard throw to Pimpleton and hit him in stride, or make that big third down throw on the corner, or throw a hook route to Ja'Cory Sullivan on a big third down and complete it and move the chains. So I think that's where a lot of the optimism stems from. And also this defense, with the exception of letting that one against Missouri get away in kind of the second half, has been really good. The secondary really hasn't been tested a ton, and the defensive line has showed a lot of strength. The Valdosta State transfer, Thomas Incoom, has been a guy, I think it's 3.5 tackles for loss for him through 2 games as a Chippewa. And he's a big reason why a lot of people are excited too, because anytime you can have a solid defensive line rotation, I mean, it's one thing to have 2 or 3 guys on the defensive line, but when you can get 5 or 6 solid options rotating through there, you're going to be a problem in the MAC, and I think there is a lot of optimism because of that.
It's a very small sample size, admittedly so, with 2 games under their belt, but you make the point about the defensive improvement for the ball club this year. I mean, I think looking back, don't hold me to it, something like 32 points, 31 points a game a year ago, but giving up 30 points a game is not a formula for success. And even in the first 2 games, you give up 34 to Missouri, but, anytime you hang a shutout in college football, I really don't care who the opponent is, you're doing something right. So now all of a sudden you've got a team that's averaging 34 points a game, giving up 17. And it's a balanced offense. That doesn't come as a surprise for those of us who are familiar with Coach Jim McElwain with his time, obviously, as the head coach of Florida. But it still seems to me, if you don't stop the run, obviously with Lou Nichols, they're going to continue to pound the rock. And to me, that's got to be the biggest concern for LSU, just based on the ability of UCLA to be able to run the ball game, especially late, to put that game on ice.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% because Central Michigan has a stable of running backs, not just Lou Nichols, but Darius Bracey, the upperclassman. He's a converted defensive back who has shown a lot of natural instincts. He's been really impressive since moving to running back last year. And then they have three freshmen they're stoked about. One of them's DJ Stepney, who made his debut last weekend and led the team in rushing, 9 carries, 81 yards. I would expect him to get a little bit more playing time. Marion Lukes is a speedster. He's one of their gray shirt freshmen out of 2020, as is Miles Bailey, who had another impressive week on Saturday. So really it's all about, for as much work as Lou Nichols does, Jim McElwain truly wants this to kind of be a running back by committee, especially early, so that, you're not putting all that tread on the tires of a guy like Nichols or Bracey. If Central Michigan wants to keep this thing competitive, they're going to have to get good production from all four of those guys, really, maybe even all five if you count Stepney.
I've seen a couple of, quick cuts of the first two games of the season. And again, I talked to Tiger fans this week in preparation of the game, and one of the things that they immediately jumped to is all of the motion, all of the window dressing that they saw, that LSU saw against UCLA with Chip Kelly, is kind of a staple of what you'll see with Jim McElwain. Not only does he have a stable of running backs that you just pointed out, I mean, you can expect some of the speedy receivers at times to be involved, whether it be the jet toss or end arounds or reverses. I mean, typically, if he's got speed on the outside, he will also use those in the run game as well.
Absolutely. Last year when they were a bit shorthanded, they went to kind of the wildcat, and they would run it all the time last year, especially when Daniel Richardson went down. And while we haven't seen it as much through the first two games, we have seen it a little bit with Lou Nichols and Bracey. And, I'd expect Pimpleton to get involved in that as well. A converted high school quarterback who actually threw a touchdown last year from his wide receiver position. So, yeah, I agree with you. You're going to see a lot of that. They're going to send Pimpleton in fly motion, and they're going to send, Bracey around. And they love doing it. And not only is it kind of a look that can keep defenses off guard, it makes it easier for your quarterback too. When you send a guy like Khalil Pimpleton in motion, and you can see whether or not it's man or zone coverage, and you can see how they're attacking it. I mean, when you're lining up against a guy like Derek Stingley, like they're going to on Saturday night, you want to know where he's playing or how he's playing you. And my guess is he'll play quite a bit of man-to-man, but still to have that window dressing and send guys in motion and throw those different looks makes it easier for a guy like Jacob Sermon.
Christian Booher, beat writer for Central Michigan Life. Young man knows a lot about this Chippewa football team. Been reading his stuff. By the way, Christian, great stuff, following even back into the summer in preparation of this season. And then, of course, following up on the first two games. Really exceptional writing.
I appreciate that.
You obviously know football. You obviously know the Chippewas. And that's why I thought this is the guy we got to have on LSU ReCon. Brought to you by Cards and Culture. You can check them out online at cardsandculture.com. Anthony Renato, his entire team. Go by and see them if you haven't stopped by at their Perkins Row location in Baton Rouge. When the Tigers have these night games, it's a great time. If they're going to kick off 6:30 or 7 o'clock, pop into Cards and Culture, and who knows, you may get to see former Tiger pitcher Anthony Renato himself. I want to talk about the receivers a little bit and their ability to stretch the field. I mean, it's obvious, as you pointed out, with the Washington transfer Sermon at quarterback, he would not have been recruited at Washington had he not been able to throw the peel around the yard. So that's pretty well established. But he's got some veteran receivers that, at least in the first two games, have been his go-to guys. What challenges are they going to bring to Derek Stingley and Eli Ricks and the rest of the Tiger secondary?
Well, to break it down for you, they've kind of got three main guys out there. Ja'Cory Sullivan, it's kind of a funny story. Charlie Fry, who used to be the offensive coordinator here, called Ja'Cory the War Daddy, which basically is his kind of moniker for their guy who they can go to at any time in one-on-one coverage. And, you saw, I don't know how much you've seen at the Missouri game, but just about every third down they were dialing up an RPO for Ja'Cory on the backside in single coverage. And a lot of those times he was winning it. He had a really exceptional game against the Tigers. Didn't have to show as much against Robert Morris. That Robert Morris team was just so depleted. It was kind of tough. But Ja'Cory is kind of their main go-to guy in single coverage, kind of a bigger body receiver. Not going to beat you a ton in, the go ball, 40, 50-yard routes. You're not going to see that a ton from him. But on a 3rd down and 7, you're going to see the Chippewas call his number quite a bit. Dallas Dixon's kind of your vertical threat. He can make plays in all 3 areas, whether it be the short game on a slant route, kind of the in-between with a dig, or he can beat you going deep too. So I would expect there to be a lot of attention being paid to him. And then Khalil Pimpleton's the speedster, and he's going to move around, and you're going to see him just in a ton of different ways. He's going to go take jet sweeps. He's going to go take slant routes. You're going to see him kind of run those little whip routes where it's 3 steps to the inside, then quick 2 back to the outside toward the sideline. What Jim McElwain likes to do with him is he likes to put him in situations where he can get a defender one-on-one and just flat out beat him with his speed. So just kind of the roundabout way of looking at it, it's kind of like they're 3-dimensional, where Jacory's kind of your go-to one-on-one guy. Dallas can stretch the field, and then Khalil Pimpleton can beat you in all sorts of ways. It's just a matter of getting him the ball, really, just because, at 5'8", it can be really hard for him to win against a physical corner who can keep up with him. And so that's one thing that I'll be really paying attention to on Saturday, is how can they get him involved.
Christian Booher, the beat writer for the Chippewas, our guest with some really valuable intelligence here on LSU ReCon. Again, you can follow him on Twitter. He'll probably be leaving a few tidbits leading up to the game on Saturday night at CBooher. That's CBOOHER _. So check it out. Let's move to defense a little bit. And, it appears, again, the middle part, your linebackers as well as the secondary kind of leading the way. Top tacklers include the linebackers Troy Brown, Kyle Moretti, and then on the back end, Gage Kresge, Devontae Reed. Anybody else I'm leaving out? Before we start talking about the defensive front, the linebacking core and again, the cornerbacks and safety. I mean, they obviously know the challenge they're going to have with the weapons LSU possesses, which, no offense to Missouri, individually, LSU is going to be a more talented team. But what have you gotten as far as what the coach's confidence level is in being able to slow down a passing game that LSU is certainly going to try to do early and often?
Well, I think it's going to be super interesting to watch in the secondary. The linebackers are in good shape. Troy Brown's a converted safety, and he's 2-time first-team All-MAC. One of the best players in the conference, and really at the Group of 5 level on the defensive side of the football. But that defensive backfield is real young. I mean, the secondary is mainly comprised of, the safeties are all upperclassmen, Devontae Reed, Alonzo McCoy, Gage Kresge, all, in their 4th year or even longer. In McCoy's case and Kresge's case, they're both 6th-year guys thanks to, COVID and redshirting and this and that. But the cornerback position is still a bit of a question mark because Deshaun McNary is a junior now, and he played all 6 games last year, but wasn't really a world beater, very up and down with his performance. And, Coach McElwain expected him to kind of take that big step forward heading into this year, and he really hasn't been tested through 2 games. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes, and I'm sure that LSU will attack him from the jump. The other one is Dante Kent, who's a freshman. He was one of the few 2020 signees to actually come to campus last year and play in the 6-game season, and he looked all right and, beat out a guy like Brian Edwards, who's now in the transfer portal. But Dante, I mean, all it took was one play in that Missouri game, and, the Tigers went right after him and beat him for a huge gain. So I think you're going to get the good with the bad when it comes to Dante Kent. Still very young, exceptional athlete, but still very young and a lot to learn there. So that's really the one big thing, is who can emerge as that backside corner for a guy against like Keishawn Butte, who's going to cause a lot of problems, not just with his athleticism, but with his overall size. And Dante Kent's 5'10". That might end up being a very tough test, and I think Central Michigan's going to learn a lot about that cornerback position from how they do against LSU.
Well, there's no question. I mean, they're obviously going to be tested not only with Butte, but Coy Moore and really some talented freshmen that also will have a little bit of a size advantage. But I got to believe there's a little bit of confidence in the fact that, it's kind of hard when you win 45-0 over Robert Morris to glean a lot from that type of matchup. But, I still lean back on watching the film against Missouri. And what was impressive is Tiger fans certainly remember, Christian, that a year ago, Connor Bazelak lit up LSU. 406 yards passing, had 4 touchdowns in Mizzou's big 45-41 win. I got to believe there's some confidence there for the Chippewas that they allowed, or they held him to just 257 yards passing, which is not a bad day at the office, but again, not lights out. And, confidence is a dangerous thing, especially when a team is coming in as a 19 or 20-point underdog.
Well, yeah, Central Michigan secondary, certainly. I mean, their biggest problem against Missouri was pass interference. I think they had 3 or 4 just back-breaking pass interference penalties. Dante Kent had one on a 4th down and 2 that would have turned them over. And, Missouri ends up getting the ball, moving the chains, and then scoring a touchdown 2 plays later to tie the game at 14. But no, I think you're right. There is some optimism there. Obviously, like I mentioned with McNary and Kent, you know what the good is. I mean, especially with Dante Kent, he's very rangy, good instincts. Had a really nice interception against Eastern Michigan to win the game last year, where he kind of put it all out there on display, the speed, the instincts, kind of that quick twitch ability that he has. It's just one of those things where you don't really know for certain what you're going to get, and I think that's kind of why some eyebrows are raised. But certainly, if you can get good performances from those guys, you're going to be in good shape. And also, there's some youngsters they're still optimistic about. Rollian Sturkey at corner is a converted safety. He's looked good. Day Hill's another one of those freshmen from last year who, I mean, these coaches think the world of Day Hill. It's just a matter of getting him the reps and getting him comfortable out there. And then the other one is true freshman Elijah Ricard, another one of those guys who these coaches think the world of. It's just a matter of, is he ready to go right now? So there's certainly optimism in that defensive backfield. And another thing that helps them out and helped them out against Missouri was that front line's ability to get pressure on the quarterback. They've got 3 really good defensive ends in Troy Hairston, Laquan Johnson, and Thomas Incoom. And to keep it short and sweet, I mean, you look at Troy Hairston, he's only 5'10". He's not going to blow anybody away with his measurables, but this dude's got heart. And he's going to bring that to Death Valley, and I think that's going to be something that fans can take away, is Hairston is going to put heat on the quarterback all night long. And then obviously with Laquan Johnson and Thomas Incoom, you've got 2 physically opposing dudes who are going to bring the heat.
Great stuff here on LSU ReCon from our guest, Christian Booher, again, the beat writer for Central Michigan Life. I want to talk special teams a little bit, Christian, mainly because in these type games, when it's the little guy up against the world coming into Death Valley, taking on the SEC and LSU, a team that I think you can make the case for really has improved from week 1 to week 2. Still plenty of work to do. But special teams in those hidden yards and getting some of those hidden yards and certainly not losing hidden yards. So, kind of what's the feeling on the special teams unit, because there is a very small margin for error if you're going to try to shock the college football world.
Yeah, they've got Khalil Pimpleton as their their punt returner. Marion Lukes and Darius Bracey do the kick returning. And Pimpleton obviously very explosive, but again, haven't really seen anything out of that return game in the first 2 games. The one area I will point to is the kicking and punting. Both Marshall Meter and Luke Elzinga, in their first years playing last year, were first-team All-MAC. Meter was perfect from the field. He showcased his big leg, career long of 53. He's already hit one from 51 this year. Missed a chip shot on Saturday, but Jim McElwain said he wasn't too concerned about it. That was actually the first miss of Meter's career, crazy enough, in his second year. And then Luke Elzinga, booming leg. Been very impressed with how he's handled the punting duties since last year. So certainly I would say their special teams unit from that perspective is in pretty good shape. Obviously, those 2 guys working last year in front of empty crowds. So they're going to get their eyes opened on the trip down to Death Valley this weekend. But I think they'll be all right in terms of that. And then, not to get too crazy, but I definitely think that McElwain's got a gadget or 2 dialed up in case this thing's close in the fourth quarter. I mean, Luke Elzinga is a high school quarterback. They've got some other guys who they can kind of sneak onto the field. So I wouldn't be surprised if they've worked on that this week. And I'm guessing they're certainly trying to gain an advantage on the special team side of things.
Obvious question as we close things up, Christian. Central Michigan's a team out of the MAC that has played, big-time schools. This isn't like the first. It's not like FCS coming in to take on LSU. So, and obviously, Coach McElwain talking to Adam Jackson, the play-by-play voice, earlier in the week, he said, hey, look, he's already been talking about the type of atmosphere they're going to have to deal with, which is, is not their typical Saturday on the road. I think that's easy to say. But for this program, take the coaches and players out. They got to go and try to win a game, and that's going to be hard enough. But for Central Michigan fans, what does this game represent, and how big a game would it be if, number one, they have a good showing, number two, if they're able to upset LSU?
Well, I think it's one of those measuring stick games, honestly. You talk about games like that, and you can find out how good you are real fast against a quality opponent like this. And, you've got two more. You got this one and then Florida International before you head into MAC play, and that MAC play stretch starts with a bang where you're taking on 3 teams in a row that are all viewed as legitimate contenders for the MAC championship. I think what this would mean to the fans is it would mean the world. It would mean that Jim McElwain's the guy. Obviously he took the team to the MAC title game in his first year, but then last year they just really weren't that great. And a lot of people obviously still believe in him as the head coach of the future for this program. But at the end of the day, if you can put forth a good showing against a team like LSU, you can remind the world just of what you're capable of, and you can assert yourself as one of the better teams in the MAC. And really that's what non-conference is all about for teams like this. I mean, Toledo took Notre Dame down to the wire and were a decision or two away from winning that game. And now all of a sudden the whole world's on notice with Toledo. This is Central Michigan's chance to do just that. You're looking at a team that maybe is a little bit more physically imposing than you. Obviously the atmosphere is unlike anything we've seen this year. But at the end of the day, if you can come forth and you can, maybe win this game or at least keep it close headed to the fourth, you can remind a lot of people of what this program did just 2 years ago in 2019. And really assert yourself as a MAC title contender, and just remind the fans of what they're coming to see when they walk into Kelly Short Stadium.
Christian, I'm telling you, man, great stuff. Not only thank you for joining us on LSU ReCon, but you're a hell of a writer. I really mean that. Learned quite a bit from you over the last week or so on Central Michigan, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show, and you got a bright future ahead of you, and best of luck. Enjoy watching the game from Michigan this weekend. Too bad you can't get to Baton Rouge, but as I told you before we started, there's a lot of rain here, maybe a lot of rain Saturday, so maybe we can do it again real soon.
Well, yeah, hey, I really appreciate the opportunity and the kind words. It means a lot. Thank you. All
right, everybody, that's going to wrap up this week. LSU ReCon, Tigers and Chippewas, 6:30 kickoff. Actually, about 6:39, Boot will meet ball inside Death Valley on another Saturday night. 1-1 Chippewas, your 1-1 Fighting Tigers. We'll have everything started for you at 4:30 with LSU game day. Then we'll have the play-by-play coverage, as I said, at 6:39. Thanks to Christian Booher, beat writer again for Central Michigan Life. Follow him on Twitter at @CBooher_. Thanks to the great people at Cards and Culture. Check them out at cardsandculture.com. And thank you for stopping by our little show. See you next week. And until then, so long, everybody. Go Tigers.
LSU ReCon is a production of LSUSP and Playfly Sports. Hit the subscribe button now and never miss a new episode. You can follow Chris at LSU Tigers Voice.